To be fair, I had made up my mind to join Azure. Just then, a friend of mine switched outside of Microsoft. I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. I should be. So then I started interviewing, and Meta at that time had a lot of things in open source. So that attracted me even more. I mean, I can say this from personal experience as well. Nobody is born a leader. Look at leaders and we think, oh my God, they're doing such an amazing thing. I can't ever do that. But what you're discounting is the journey. I obviously messed up a few things, got feedback on it, happened to be in tougher situations where I had to pick up leadership skills.
Welcome to Leadership Pulse Podcast. I'm Sharma, your host. On this podcast, we invite various tech professionals to share their life journeys and share insights. We have with us Raviraj, who is a staff software engineer at Meta and also an author of Tech Lead Mentor newsletter. Raviraj, why don't you take a moment and tell us about yourself?
Hey, I'm Raviraj. As you said, I'm a staff software engineer at Meta. I work in internal cloud at Meta, so in Meta infrastructure. I'm excited to be here to talk about my journey and hopefully leave some actionable tips for the listeners.
Wonderful. Raviraj, so let's start with your journey so far. Like, how did you go from a junior engineer at Microsoft and now to a staff software engineer at Meta?
So it was a long journey. I started at Microsoft in 2012 and at Meta right now. When I started, I joined a photo editing team. It was a lot of fun building the app from ground up for Windows 8.1 at the time. Had a lot of fun for the first 3 years, worked on performance improvements, speed, really cared about frames per second and so on. But my grad school, I was focused on distributed systems and I really wanted to get back to it. So the last year at Microsoft, I was itching to get into it. I switched, joined Meta, joined a hardcore distributed systems team, been in that domain and that area since then, worked through my way. I joined as a mid-level engineer at Meta. I became a senior, then a staff, all through exercising leadership skills, learning from other people.
Nice. So can you tell us a little bit more about, like, other than distributed systems, what caused you the move from Microsoft to Meta? Or was it purely distributed systems?
So I knew I wanted to move into distributed systems. That was one thing that was very sure of. To be fair, I had made up my mind to join Azure. Just then, a friend of mine switched outside of Microsoft. I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. I should be. So then I started interviewing. I did. When I interviewed, I was still focused on getting only into infra teams. I interviewed in a few places, found the best offer for me, and joined Meta. And Meta at that time had a lot of things in open source. So that attracted me even more.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about the infra teams. Like, what's so special about infra teams? Like, why infra teams?
So I had this mental image from grad school that distributed systems was solving consensus, solving technologies out there. So I was always fascinated by reading papers then. So I don't know, I didn't have any reality check, but I knew it was going to be fancy. So that's what motivated me. And a lot of projects at that time that were open source were distributed systems projects. They also interested me. And that was the main reason why I was focused on distributed systems. And that's what I mean by infra.
Cool. Wonderful. Love it. Can you tell us a little bit about how your journey has shaped up who you are today?
A lot of things along the way happened. There were a lot of learnings. I obviously messed up a few things, got feedback on it, happened to be in tougher situations where I had to pick up leadership skills. Early on at Microsoft, a year or two into Microsoft, I got a feedback where I heard I wasn't listening to people. So there were these different moments in my career where I realized there were a lot of things to improve, and they shaped and taught me very specific things. If you want, I can dig into the first one because that was like the first changing experience for me, which was getting feedback. I remember this meeting. It was a performance review meeting with my manager. I think the rating and all of those things were just fine, but manager said, hey, we have a critical feedback this time for you, and somebody senior, so it had substance, it was real, said that I wasn't listening. It didn't make much sense in that meeting. In fact, I also felt really bad. All I remember from that meeting in retrospect is just that feedback and nothing else. But my manager was good. I met with him the week after again. By then, I had done some homework. I think he did too. I brought up a few scenarios where I thought I might not have listened, and we dug in. It boiled down to just cutting over people, not letting people finish, using words like no as the first thing, and overly challenging others during discussions. So that was like the biggest learning that I had. I'm so glad I did at the time. It was uncomfortable listening, but I'm so glad I got that feedback early in my career, because if nobody told me, I think it would have just been okay, and I would have kept doing what I did. And it's okay in your early stages, but it's certainly not when you grow senior or beyond. People skills matter.
Yeah, no, you absolutely said it right. Actively listening, and the way I like to call it, listening to understand and not to respond. Is a feedback that one of my early mentors gave me and has kind of stuck with me ever since. So probing a little bit more into it, how did you take this feedback initially? Like, were you like, oh yeah, I understand, or did you retaliate? Like, what was your reaction?
My natural immediate reaction in that meeting, which is what most people do, is, yeah, I don't think so. I listened, but because my manager was great and he just let it be, he didn't try to push me on it and say, no, there is a feedback, we have to address it. So you are doing something wrong. He didn't do any of those. He just like heard me out. And because he didn't challenge back, but he was like, this is a feedback that we have and we should dig into it and make sure we improve. It made sense. And it also gave me a moment to showcase my discomfort with the feedback. So that meeting was like, it wasn't any constructive discussion that happened. The feedback was delivered. I took the time to absorb, felt really bad. Like that week, I would say I kept thinking about all situations where somebody would have felt that way, feeling overly bad about my responses in the past to someone, like stating things. And overly analyzing situations so that I could bring it back to the manager and say, hey, these were the situations. What do you think? So yeah, initial reaction, pretty like not mature, I would say, but that's very natural. And that's the stepping stone to grow.
Cool. Seems like you came out of that really, really well. I think your career has been a sort of a endorsement of your growth. Knowing what you know today, if you had this knowledge at that time, how would you have responded to that feedback?
So I think now when I hear feedback, I'm more like letting it settle in. Yes, if somebody is bringing something, there is something to it. It's just perhaps who's sharing the feedback not doing due diligence, may not have all the information. Now my reaction to these things are, okay, let's try to look into a specific example here. What would have been the desired outcome? What I could have done differently in that situation? What would you, as person delivering the feedback, would have done differently? I do have used this quite a bit later in my career as well, where I've put the person giving a feedback that I felt was kind of vague and asking their help. Basically saying, hey, I don't know what to do, but like hopefully you can show me the light. Those were the things that I learned along the way. And if I had to go back and tell myself then, others, I would say that fortunately, like because the manager was good, like it would have been still the same outcome. It wouldn't have changed it. But if my manager would have gotten upset the way I reacted, it could have easily gone in a different direction. And then this sort of feedback would really help.
Yeah. No, I think you're kind of raising very valid points about being vulnerable, asking clarifying questions, that kind of demonstrates that you are curious, you want to understand, and not kind of brushing off the feedback that you heard. So very, very valid points. Cool. So just go back in the past to your early childhood, right? So what is it one thing you wish you knew before you started your career?
Yeah, I think one thing, if I had to say, is you don't have to be perfect. And this was the root of imposter syndrome. I had it quite a bit. To this date, even now, I can get into a situation like this. But then there's a framework where I can like sort of pull myself out of it. But if I had to tell one thing back to my younger self, that would be, you don't need to make everything perfect. In fact, perfectionism, you end up spending a lot of time on things that are absolutely unnecessary. There is a point, inflection point in the graph where like you've put in all the effort to get the maximum reward and now you're just like wasting time. it's okay. Like failing fast is way better than trying to make something perfect and it's like at the wrong time.
I can also attest to the same thing. What I learned the hard way is perfection is the enemy of good enough. It's better to make progress versus waiting for that perfect answer, perfect product, perfect customer, right? So it's better to keep making progress and learn and do incremental improvements. So wonderful. Shifting gears, let's talk about your biggest failure, something that was so profound that kind of changed your life. It was pivotal for your career, your personal journey.
There are quite a few. There's one instance, and then there is a general trait, I would say. I'll talk about the instance, and I've written about this in my newsletter as well. So coming from Microsoft, spent 6-7 months at Meta, and I was assigned this one project. The goal of the project was to improve memory resources in our infrastructure, and I was working on it. I knew what the trade-offs were. However, it so happened that I learned the trade-offs were erring on the side of not so good versus good at some point, but I didn't communicate it to the customer team. And when they learned about this from me, 3 months down the line, when I had the feature implemented, I had a rollout plan, I had a strategy to deploy it, they're like, I don't think this is worth it because the trade-off is not what we expected. And I hadn't communicated that. So my mindset was, I'm assigned a project, I got to finish it. The mindset should have been, there is an impact that we're chasing, we need to go get the impact. And the cost associated with it needs to be evaluated. Writing the code wasn't just the cost. Deploying, safe deploying, measuring, and maintenance were all the costs associated with it. For me, that was never a thing. I worked on product before, not in distributed systems. I wasn't thinking about impact the way I should have been thinking about it because then it was building features that would be used by people. Editing was a necessity. So it never crossed my mind. But when that incident happened and the customer sort of refused to ship the project, I felt really bad. Like there were two things that happened. One, oh shit, what am I going to do with my review now? I've spent 3 months on this. Second, like what could I have done differently to catch this? Fast forward, like if I was put on a right project later on in a few weeks, so something that was impactful, but I had built a mindset of thinking of impact. The goal was reducing cost, and I was aggressively searching for more things that would deliver impact. And it so happened that for the remainder of the year, I worked on high impactful things, and obviously the project that I was assigned to, I didn't come up with the idea on my own for that one. But combination of all of this ended up giving me a very good rating by the end of the year. That has stuck with me. Always think about impact, like no matter what. And it is very temporal. Impact can change when situations around you change. Maybe what you are optimizing for today need not be what you do tomorrow. The company priorities can change. Some other constraints that you are depending on changes. So you have to be very mindful of that when you chase impact and adjust accordingly. So that was like the one big thing that I remember.
So I think you brought a few important points here, and I would like to go a level deeper into these. So I think you talked about impact as a paramount thing. You also talked about this fear of what will I write in my performance reviews, right? So help our listeners understand, like when you come across such a situation, how would you address that, especially when you are new to a team, new to a role? If you get this project which you don't think is going to add a lot of value, how do you approach that conversation?
So there are a few things that one should do before hitting that point. Over communicate. I cannot stress this enough. Like even now to this day, I feel like I'm over communicating, but I'm not. There is a point in which you could actually be over communicating, but as long as there is value to what you're saying, make it frequent, share it soon enough. So when you do that, you never enter a situation like this where you have spent multiple months doing something that somebody could have told you to pivot early on. So do that well before. Let's say you do something that you are communicating the right way, but you do end up at a point where the project needs to be cut. It's fine. People understand there was a decision that was made given the data and the constraints that were known at that point. You learned something more. So what you write in your PSC is what you learned. Hopefully when you end something, and the thing that I actually built, and I haven't shared this in my newsletter, is a few years down the line, somebody else picked that same feature and finished it because some of the constraints had changed. So the code was there, it just had to be rolled out, and somebody picked it up. So when things change, it can be picked up. So when you do something that ends up in a quote unquote failure, it's okay. Leave it in a state that can be used in future. Show your learnings, make bigger announcements of why you ended up in a decision where you are. That goes a long way so reacting to mistakes go a long way than being silent and flying away when you make a mistake. So that would be my biggest advice when anything like this happens. And as long as you have the support for that project and you did the right thing, your manager will back you up because they also okayed the decision for you to spend that time. And they should back you up in that case. Most good or decent managers will do that.
Yeah, no, wonderful, wonderful. So let me summarize what I heard and feel free to add if I miss anything. So what you're suggesting is focusing on three things. One is the impact. The impact needs to be there for everything that you work on. Second is over-communicate. Make sure your stakeholders, your manager understands everything. And if something doesn't work at that point in time, understand the context. It's not a thing that will never work. It's a thing that didn't work given the constraints at that moment. Where the constraints change, the outcome might change. Is that accurate?
Very accurate, yeah.
Cool, awesome, wonderful. Anything else you would want to, kind of going back to this time, like, you talked about, you understood the trade-offs and it took you 3 months to do it and then you realized not worth it. Other than communication, was there anything else that you should have done at that point in time?
I think in that specific instance, it was mainly communication. Also, it was not 3 months of busy time. Specifically on that, there were other things that were happening, just on call, like other things. So that way I did get to work on some other things on the side. But in this case, it was communicating the specific trade-off assumption that this other team had made. No, it was way worse than they expected it to be. And that was the key differentiator.
Wonderful. Excellent. As we all know, behind every successful person, there is an entire village supporting them. So who has been the most influential person in your life?
So I would like to answer this in general. For a lifetime period, it's a big period. So generally, you mentioned family in this case, and that was the same for me. Growing up, my parents putting me in the right place, helping me not worry about too many things, but just focus on studies and getting into engineering. That support was phenomenal. And now, I've been married for a while now. So my wife, we are a good thought partner when it comes to work problems, just ideas outside. We tech lead mentor thinking about, hey, is this going to click, not click? What do you think? Do you want to take a read? So a support like that at home goes a long way. They have been my most influential people.
Cool. Is there anything that you from your parents, from your wives, that that kind of like something they told you that kind of stuck with you, like, and kind of changed your life for good?
I remember one instance. So when I finished my undergrad, I had an interview with Microsoft, campus interview. I didn't get through in the last round. Very upsetting. When I got the news, a few of my friends were at home and they were all expecting that I would get through. Like, because most of it was good, except for one bit. I knew the last interview wasn't how it should be, but everyone was like, oh, they'll ignore it. Every other interview was great, so you'll be okay. And it didn't. So like, it was the atmosphere changed very quickly. And my mom was also at home. And when I just stepped aside, she said, it's life. Like, you're experiencing a downward moment. There will be upward moments that will come later. Like, don't let this define you. Failures happen. It's okay. So that has stuck with me. And then when I eventually actually got into Microsoft here, I remember telling those friends this incident as well. So sort of that, what my mom said, sort of ingrained in me.
Cool. Do you have any other example afterwards that you used this learning and said, I'm not going to worry about it. It happened. Life happens.
Oh, all the time. Like, every time I feel like an imposter or cross-team, cross-organizational discussion where it feels too intense, like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Are we, like, am I going to get fired? Obviously not for something like this. So, like maybe a moment of shame, but that's okay. We'll get through, and there will be enough successes to celebrate. So yeah, it's always this, like, it's okay. There is a moment where it feels like it's not going in your favor, but think about all the past wins and wins that can come in the future.
Cool. So building onto that, your earlier thought of when you were in college and you were going through a campus placement interview for Microsoft, like what advice would you give the younger folks who are right now looking, coming out of school, starting their careers? Like, how should they prepare for an interview? How should they go about this?
I have to address the elephant in the room right now, which is the market. Unfortunately, the market is not in the favor for new grads. It's been like an interesting last year, this year, and may continue early next year as well. So all things right now are, what I say is applies to general scenarios and not specifically given the market conditions. Focus on, have a good resume. If you are a new grad looking to get in, have enough projects that you, in the areas that you like, if it's distributed systems or if it is AI or ML, like have enough of those projects on your resume so that you clear the first hurdle, which is getting a call. Once you're in, now it's a matter of clearing those coding rounds and behavioral rounds. For new grads, generally, the industry doesn't do system design, so most companies won't ask you, so you're kind of okay there. So for coding, grind, lead code, but for most people, same for me when I switched from Microsoft to Meta. Like initially, it feels like you're not learning much and feels like all questions are difficult. But then after continuous amount of time working on those questions, there is an inflection point where you feel, oh, okay, now I'm getting these questions. Sort of train my mind to think about this. You weren't doing this before. Like we don't do lead code on a day-to-day basis. So don't be demotivated when you don't see results. You will. Just be persistent. Hard work pays off. And then when you're on upward trajectory and you see questions and you're able to solve it, you're sort of ready. And do your best on the day. Don't worry. Interviewers can be bad. Your day can be bad. Bad luck happens. So don't beat yourself up with rejections.
Cool. No, that's wonderful. That reminds me, my dad told me a similar story. For what it's worth, I graduated in the year 2000, which was the Y2K year, and practically there were no campus placements. So at that time, I was very devastated. Like, oh my God, like we had to graduate in this year, like no campus placement, whatnot. And my dad told me, life happens. Just focus on upskilling yourself, keep at it, show up daily, don't give up. Things will happen. So I thank you for sharing what your mom has shared with you and sharing your advice with all our listeners. Cool. Let's shift gears and go to a completely different direction, right? So what is one myth about our tech industry that you want to debunk? Like, this is all false.
Yeah. I mean, I can say this from personal experience as well. The first one is nobody is born a leader. Look at leaders and we think, oh my God, they're doing such an amazing thing. I can't ever do that. But what you're discounting is the journey. What you don't see is what got them there. So the biggest myth I would say is leaders are mostly trained. They work towards being a leader. So you can be a leader too. Don't be demotivated when you look at somebody else who's doing the right things in a particular situation and coming out very well. I have a second one as well. I've been doing some mentorship, pro bono mentorships, and what has come across is people are hesitant in asking for their own promotions. There is sort of this feeling in the industry that you can't ask for your growth. You can't ask for a hike. You can't ask for a promotion yourself. That's not true. A lot of people do it. They do it very openly with their manager. I'm sure if you ask any manager, if anyone ever has asked them about their promo or pushed for their promo, you will hear yes. If no, like perhaps just not exposed to a lot of engineers out there. So yeah, go ahead. Like have that conversation with your manager. Put a timeline. Don't worry about what they will think. As long as you're respectful. Like, don't be rude about it. or don't give a threatening ultimatum, but put a timeline, very respectfully ask, what does it take me to get there?
Cool. No, that's an important topic. Like I have seen similar in my coaching sessions with a lot of people coming and saying, "Hey, I'm not getting promoted," and when you ask them, like, why should somebody promote you, and they don't have an answer, like, or do you ask them, like, have you spoken to your manager about it, and they're like, no, I have not, but I've been doing all this great work, but nobody's promoting me. Right? So I would want to go a level deeper into this, like. What advice would you give people to how to approach this conversation? A lot of people are stuck in, oh, I don't know how I approach this. Like, I can't go and tell my manager, you need to promote me. Right? So, like, how should they approach this conversation?
I think there could be a couple of reasons why people may not approach this. I think it's important to understand that. And that could be different for different people. One, it could be just your hesitation in going to the other level up. But for me, at couple of instances, it was maybe I'm not good enough. So I don't want to hear all things that I'm not good enough. But like, unless you hear it, you're not going to grow. The only thing that you're going to keep thinking is, I'm doing all these great things. I don't want to listen to all things that I'm not doing well, but I want to get promoted. Nobody's actively perhaps thinking about this, but it's a feeling that we have. It's a fear that we have where we are a bit hesitant in opening that door where our shortcomings would be discussed openly. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing you have to get over, where your manager already knows about your shortcomings. If they have worked with you for long enough, you not discussing it is not changing those shortcomings, but you just don't know about it and you're not able to work on it. So have that conversation. It can be a bit uncomfortable when you start. You could be as mellow as you want, but it will not have as impactful effect to the situation. But the more direct you are, respectful you are with your manager. Yeah, I've been on this role for a while now, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever the time period is. I want to start thinking about my growth. In a year, I want to hit the next level. I'm at X now. I want to get to X plus 1. I looked at the expectations guide that the company has, and I check. It seems like I've checked out a lot of things. Can you help me show some gaps here? Your manager, if they have done your calibrations for a while, they will have some answers to share with you. It's okay if they can't give you everything in that meeting because you brought it up all out of nowhere, so they are a bit surprised. Give them some time. Give them a week or two. They'll come back with specific suggestions for you. If they're not specific enough, you can ask them to make it specific. Give an example of the situation. If it's cross collaboration where you need to show more signals, what does showing more signals mean? Is there a specific project where you want me to own it completely? What is the opportunity that I have? So digging into this is important after you bring it up. It is going to be uncomfortable, but yeah, you have to take the first step. Otherwise, no one else will do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually wrote a similar post on this thing last night on LinkedIn about there's nobody coming. Like, you have to push yourself to do whatever you need to do. Like, be it asking for a promotion, be it starting on that blog post that you're thinking about, or be the writing a book that you've been always talking about, or be starting a business, or whatever it is. There's nobody coming for you. You have to take the first step. One last question on this topic, what are some of the risks that you see of not asking for the promotion? One you already talked about, you're not getting the feedback, so you're not growing. So that is given. What are other things?
The obvious one is you won't likely get promoted in the timeline that you have. This other thing that I'm going to say is even more demotivating, which is you are overthinking now at this point. You are overthinking about your promotion. You are waiting for, as you said, for somebody or something to come, but it never does. So your little expectation now bloats up into a big expectation, but nobody else is aware of it. And that never comes. You start losing motivation at work. You don't celebrate your wins as much anymore. For you, the win is just promotion. You gradually lose interest, perhaps on a team where you were doing fine. And now maybe even you enter burnout. So that's what I feel when you don't bring it up. It just fosters in your mind and results in these things.
Cool. Wonderful. All right. Shifting gears. So I would love for you to take a moment, tell our listeners about where to find you online.
Yeah. So I am these days active on LinkedIn. I post daily tips, and my focus is predominantly people skills. I strongly believe people skills are undervalued in our industry, and I write tips for people to grow. I also write a newsletter, Tech Lead Mentor. I started about 3 months ago, and I share my personal stories, how I learned certain traits, and how people can learn them. So techleadmentor.com is where you can find me. And on LinkedIn, it's my name, Raviraj Achar.
Thank you. And I can attest to it. I read Raviraj's newsletter every time a new blog post comes out, and then we have been sharing our thoughts on our posts. So one of the very few wonderful engineers that I would highly encourage for all of you to follow. Go follow Raviraj on his LinkedIn and subscribe to his newsletter. Cool. Let's shift gears once more. There is a lot of discussion in today about work-life balance, mental health. I know our jobs are very demanding right now. So how do you, as a person who's an immigrant and has family, how do you balance, your demanding job with your family needs and your personal aspirations while continuing to grow in your career?
Yeah, it can be hard. Actually, very hard. Personally, I touch wood. I haven't actually had full-fledged burnout. So not really, like, if somebody is experiencing this, I can sympathize, but like, hopefully you find the right help and get through it. So I feel like I've been at the brink of it, where it just feels quite overwhelming and a lot of things up in the air. For me, I have sort of reverse engineered when I feel this and what I can do to get out of it. It typically happens when some conversation goes south in some broader discussion, or some milestone that's just like prolonging, going farther and farther and not getting that win. If I actually get upset, I just slow down. I take the time. I'm still doing the must-haves and the P0s at work, but I give myself a breather. I perhaps stop right at like 5, not push like even a minute after that. Start right at like 9:30, whatever the time is. Not try to think about work as much. Watch some movies, spend time with family, just detach. That gives me enough space to not feel claustrophobic with all things that are not going well. Gives me enough things to look forward to. That gives me joy. At work, I try to find things when it's something important. Let's say I have to unblock someone. Like, I try to find wins from those. They're not perhaps related to the same thing that is pushing me over the edge, but anything that I can fix, I can improve, I can unblock someone, I can brainstorm an idea and come up with something nice. Those little wins change how I feel, sort of give me the push. So if my trajectory was this and I'm like heading towards feeling really bad, these little wins sort of slowly push me up. For me, it's like it can take a few days before that happens. Again, as I said, fortunately, I haven't had something that goes on for multiple weeks. So when I find those little wins, I sort of go back to the problem, go back to things that were bothering me. And that's how I've been able to manage getting close to a burnout, but then trying to get out of it. One thing that I haven't done, and I strongly recommend people doing this, is leveraging your managers when you feel that way. That way they can help you adjust expectations, have this conversation more open with them. They'll be able to ease the pressure, whatever you're feeling, talk through it. We try to solve a lot of things on our own, which doesn't help. You need somebody to hear you out. You need somebody to hear your frustration.
I can definitely, attest to that. I think you made a good point about whenever you're feeling low, it's always better to slow down, do things that give you joy, do things that can help you recharge. And most importantly, seek help. Like if you are going through that thing, seek help. Not everything we can do on our own. Also, seeking help is not a sign of weakness. A lot of us don't ask for help because we feel like, oh my God, what will people think about me? It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to go say, hey, I need help. I'm not able to handle this. Can you help me? I think that's usually very, very helpful. All right, Raviraj, we are almost towards the end of the show. So I have one last question for you. What is one final thought that you would want to leave with our listeners?
The one thing that I'll say, I mean, no matter where you are in your career, the specific feedback is going to be different. What can help you is different. But generally, ownership mindset and being brave. These are the two things. If you adopt them, you'll go a long way. In terms of ownership, I'll say build an eye to identify problems and act on them. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to fix all of it, but you start a conversation, you own certain direction that keeps pushing the boundaries of what you can do. The other one, which is now my personal favorite, being brave. I've been a risk-averse person for a very long time. It's okay. Sometimes you don't know everything. You have to make decisions based on the data that you have, constraints that you understand today. It's okay to pivot. Goes back to the discussion that we were having early on. But take that step. Take that first step. You may need a lot of help. Seek that. But be bold to take that one step. And when you do, if it's a project idea or anything, other people follow. And then sort of the strength grows. So those are the two things: ownership, mindset, and be brave.
Wonderful, wonderful. I would add to your ownership mindset, the way I like to call it is own the problem. You don't have to own every solution, but as long as you own the problem and make sure the solution gets delivered, I think you are doing the right thing. And, being brave, if you don't take risk, rewards are going to be limited, right? So risk and reward goes a long way. It's not only a financial construct, it is a construct that applies to our lives too. All right. It was wonderful talking to you, Raviraj. Thank you for coming to our show and sharing your insights with our viewers. It was wonderful chatting with you and hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun too. It was a lot of interesting topics and the conversation felt amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.